So now that you know a little bit about the Java fork join framework, let's talk about some of its key class elements, starting with the Java ForkJoinPool class. And you'll see that it's one of a number of classes that are central to understanding the structure and functionality of the framework. So ForkJoinPool is a class, and you can see over here it implements the executor service interface indirectly through something called the abstract executor service. And this particular class is used, the executor service interface is the basis for a slew of Java executor framework subclasses. So you can see that we have other classes that are implementing this either directly or indirectly. There are a number of other implementations of the executor service that are going to inherit from abstract executor service and implement executor service indirectly. These include thread pool executor, which we've talked about before, and scheduled thread pool executor, which I don't think we've talked about yet. And these implementations are used to execute runnables or callables. But that's not really what we care about here. We care about the ForkJoinPool, which executes ForkJoinTasks. So that's the thing it's going to execute. And we'll talk about what a ForkJoinTask is in a second. As you might imagine, ForkJoinTask has fork and join methods because that's what it's going to do. Now, it's possible to also execute runnables and callables with a ForkJoinPool, but that's really not what it's designed for. It's really designed for doing ForkJoinTasks, and we'll talk about that. Now, here's an interesting little bit of trivia. There are intentionally very few knobs that can be used by application programmers to control the behavior of a ForkJoinPool. As you can see here, there's really not a lot of things you can do to a ForkJoinPool. You can basically submit and invoke all and shut things down, and you can execute stuff. But basically, it's just a handful of methods. This is intentional. The idea was by the designer, and if you want to watch this video, Doug Lee explains why they did it this way. They wanted to make ForkJoinPool so optimized internally that there would be little or no reason to ever want to control its behavior. So they kept it intentionally simple, and that's why when I mentioned that, I put like one of the original Apple mice. The Apple mouse was designed originally to have one button because they're like, Steve Jobs is like, do one thing, that's all you want to do. Now, of course, they cheat by making you touch the various control keys and stuff like that, but whatever. Now, in contrast, thread pool executor, which is another implementation of the executor service, has a whole slew of knobs. It's more like, like a gaming mouse or something like that. And there's all kinds of things you can do. You can modify the core pool size, the max pool size, the work queue, the keep alive time, thread factory, rejected exception handler, blah, 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 all kinds of things. So it's designed to be much more complicated. And that has some virtues because you can control lots of things, but it also makes it very difficult to use. So thread pool executor, its interface was designed to maximize customization, customizability. ForkJoinPool designed to make it really simple but super duper optimized internally. However, there are some things you can do to configure the size of the common ForkJoinPool. One of the things you can do is you can set how many threads you want the pool to have. And this has to be done before the thread pool is ever used, before the first ForkJoinPool is used. But you can do that if you so choose. Not necessarily the best way to go, but it's possible. And then there's another way that's called the managed blocker, and we'll talk all about this stuff later. But this is a way to be able to dynamically adjust the number of threads in something that's called the common ForkJoinPool. And we'll come back and talk about the common ForkJoinPool later. So that's a quick overview of the Java ForkJoinPool class. Key things to keep in mind: very simple, intentionally simple, not a lot of knobs, but the implementation is really clever. And there are ways to control the number of threads as long as you are willing to learn about a few of the other features that are added in addition to the interface on ForkJoinPool.